At 70 years old, I found myself standing at the entrance of my own beach house in Malibu, the keys trembling in my hands. What is this old parasite doing here? There's no room for you, my daughter-in-law, Jessica shouted at me from the terrace. I had arrived early that morning, expecting to find my house empty, as usual. My home had been invaded by her family. My furniture was ruined, my garden destroyed. But before I continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories reach. That Friday morning, I drove to my beach house in Malibu, as I had done hundreds of times over the last 20 years. The route was familiar, the curves of the coastal highway, the smell of salt in the air, the sight of palm trees swaying against the blue sky. This house represented everything I had achieved in my life. Every brick, every tile, every plant in the garden had been bought with the money I earned working as a seamstress ever since I was widowed. When I turned into the driveway, I noticed something strange. There were cars I didn't recognize parked in my garage. Loud music echoed from the property, a festive sound that seemed out of place in the quiet refuge I had created. As I parked, I felt a tightness in my chest, that sixth sense that warns us when something isn't right. When I got out of the car, the impact of what I saw took my breath away. My beautiful garden, which I tended to myself every weekend, was devastated. Empty beer cans dotted the perfectly cut lawn. Children were running across the terrace, kicking a ball against my pots of red geraniums that I cultivated with so much love. The wicker chairs I had bought the previous year were covered with wet towels and dirty clothes. I walked slowly towards the entrance, the keys weighing in my hands as never before. That's when I saw her. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, standing in the main doorway as if she owned the place. She was wearing my favorite apron, the one I had embroidered myself a decade ago. Her eyes had that cold look I knew so well. "Jessica, I didn't know you were here," I said, trying to stay calm despite the chaos around me. "This is my house. I come here every holiday weekend, for the last 20 years. She laughed. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was a sound loaded with cruelty that made me feel small and insignificant, as if I were the intruder on my own property. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "Robert told me we could use the house whenever we wanted. Besides, we're doing something productive here. You just come to complain and ruin our family plans." Before I could answer, more people began to appear behind her. Veronica, her sister, with her 2 teenage sons, her gray-haired mother who looked at me with disdain, an older man in a Hawaiian shirt, a young woman with a baby in her arms, and another man smoking calmly on my porch. They all looked at me as if I were the problem. "Is this the famous mother-in-law you talk about so much?" Jessica's mother asked, sizing me up from head to toe. I thought she'd be more imposing. She seems rather common. The snickers that followed hit me like arrows. There I was, at 70 years old, in my simple travel clothes, being ridiculed by strangers on the property I built with the sweat of my labor. "Where is Robert?" I asked, feeling my heart race. My son needed to be there to explain this absurd situation. "Robert is working, as always," Jessica replied, crossing her arms. "Unlike you, he has real responsibilities. Look, Eleanor, there's no room for you here. The bedrooms are all occupied. The kitchen is being used to prepare food for the whole family, and frankly, your presence is only going to create unnecessary tension." I stood there, paralyzed. She was actually kicking me out of my own house, the house I built brick by brick after my husband's death, the house I worked days and nights as a seamstress to pay for. "Besides," Jessica continued with a venomous smile, "I already spoke with Robert, and we agree that this house needs to be used more. It makes no sense for it to be empty most of the time while you live comfortably in Chicago. We have children who need space to grow." Her words hit me like stones. 20 years building this place after my husband died. 20 years paying every cent of the mortgage with the money I earned sewing clothes for other people's families. 20 years tending to every detail, every plant, every corner of this place that had become my personal sanctuary. "This house is mine, Jessica," I managed to say, though my voice sounded weaker than I would have liked. "I have the deeds. I pay all the bills. Oh, that's enough," she interrupted, raising her voice. "It's always the same thing. that it's yours, that you pay. Robert is your son, isn't he? What's yours is also his, and what's his is also mine. That's how normal families work. The children stopped playing, and everyone watched me in silence. I could feel their eyes judging me, waiting for my reaction. Humiliation burned my cheeks like fire, but something inside me refused to break. One of the teenagers, who seemed to be Jessica's niece, came closer and looked at me insolently. "Why don't you just go to a hotel? There's no space for anyone else here." "All right, dear," I finally said with a smile that came from my soul, but which I knew didn't reach my eyes. "I understand the situation perfectly." Jessica smiled triumphantly, believing she had won. The others seemed satisfied, as if they had witnessed a just victory. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. I walked back to my car with slow, dignified steps. As I drove away to find a hotel, my mind traveled to the past, to when this property was nothing more than a vacant lot full of weeds and dreams. I was 50 years old back then, Robert barely 25. It was just the two of us against the world, and I had made the most important decision of my life to build a refuge for our family. The Pacific View Inn cost me $285 a night, money I hadn't planned on spending because I was supposed to be sleeping in my own bed. But there I was, checking in like any other tourist while my house was occupied by invaders who felt entitled to my property. That night, sitting on the hotel balcony, looking at the lights of my house in the distance, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. A cold, calculated anger beginning to form inside me. It wasn't that impulsive anger that makes you scream and lose control. It was something much more dangerous. It was the intelligent anger of a woman who had survived poverty, widowhood, and decades of hard work. Jessica had made a fatal mistake. She had underestimated Eleanor Vance. The next morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. after a night of restless sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jessica's arrogant smile and heard her venomous words echoing in my mind. I had a quick coffee in the hotel restaurant and decided to go back to the house to try for a calmer conversation. Maybe it had been a misunderstanding. Maybe Robert would show up and put an end to this absurd situation. When I arrived at 8 a.m, I found the front door locked my own door. I had to ring the doorbell as if I were a visitor. Veronica, Jessica's sister, opened it, still in her pajamas and with an angry face. "What do you want now?" she asked, without even greeting me. I explained that I needed to pick up some personal things and talk to Jessica. Her response left me stunned. "Jessica is sleeping, and your things aren't here anymore. We put them in bags in the garage so they wouldn't be in the way." My things, in bags, in the garage, as if they were trash. I felt as if I had been stabbed in the chest. She let me in, but I felt like an intruder in my own home. The smell was different, a mix of strange food, cigarette smoke, and cheap perfume. The living room was unrecognizable, filled with inflatable mattresses and clothes scattered everywhere. When I entered the kitchen, my heart almost stopped. My beautiful kitchen, the one I designed thinking of all the family meals I would prepare there, was completely destroyed. The stove was covered in burnt grease, the sink overflowing with dirty dishes that already smelled bad. My best pans had permanent stains on the bottom. "Where are my porcelain plates?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Oh, some of them broke. The kids were playing and you know how they are. Jessica says they were very old anyway." My porcelain plates, which I bought one by one over the years, saving up to complete the set, which I only used on special occasions because I treated them like treasures, were broken, discarded, as if they had no value. I went upstairs to my master bedroom, the sanctuary where I had planned to rest. The door was open, and inside was Jessica's mother, organizing clothes in my closet as if it were her own. "Excuse me," I said, trying to maintain my composure. "This is my room." "Ah," my daughter Jessica explained everything. "Don't worry, I'll take very good care of your things. Look, I even organized your clothes in these bags so they don't get wrinkled. My dresses, my blouses, my shoes, all my personal clothing was stuffed into plastic bags like items destined for donation. 2 unknown boys were sleeping in my bed, and my favorite pillows were on the floor, covered in stains. As I took in this surreal scene, I noticed something that caught my attention. My secret closet, That hidden space behind the main wardrobe where I kept important documents and items of sentimental value was ajar, a place that no one but me should know about. With my heart pounding, I waited for Jessica's mother to leave the room for a moment and went to the closet. The space had been completely violated. My documents were in disarray, some on the floor. The jewelry I inherited from my mother was gone. The property deeds for the house were crumpled, as if someone had looked through them carelessly. But the most alarming thing was finding papers that weren't mine. Legal documents with Robert and Jessica's names on them. I took them with trembling hands and read quickly. It was an application for a change of ownership. They wanted to transfer the house into Robert's name, claiming that I, due to my advanced age and deteriorating mental condition, was no longer capable of managing valuable properties. Deteriorating mental condition. Me, the woman who had managed her finances perfectly for 70 years, who had built a fortune from scratch, who still worked and maintained her financial independence. They wanted to declare me mentally incompetent to steal my house. The paper was dated from the previous week. This confirmed that the invasion hadn't been spontaneous, but part of an elaborate plan to take over my property using the law in their favor. At the bottom of the papers, I found something that chilled me to the bone. A real estate appraisal. It had valued my beach house at $300,000, and there was a handwritten note in Jessica's script. With this money, we can buy a bigger apartment and send the kids to private school. We just need R to sign the papers, and for the little old lady not to cause any problems. The little old lady. That's what they called me behind my back. The little old lady who shouldn't cause problems while they stripped me of everything I had built in my life. I put all the documents in my bag as evidence. This wasn't just a family invasion. It was a planned robbery, an elaborate fraud to strip me of my life's work with my own blood as an accomplice. I went downstairs silently, and as I passed the hallway, I heard Jessica on the phone on the terrace. She was talking loudly without worrying about being discreet. "No, Mom, don't worry. The lawyer says it's very easy. Since Robert is an only child, he can claim the inheritance in advance due to the mother's incapacity. And once the house is in his name, we can do whatever we want with it. Advance inheritance due to incapacity. They wanted to declare me mentally incompetent to steal my inheritance while I was still alive. Yes, we already sent the fake medical papers. We paid $50 to that doctor from the cheap clinic to sign a report saying she has senile dementia. Robert didn't want to at first, but I explained to him that it's for the good of the children. Fake medical papers, a corrupt doctor, a fabricated report of senile dementia. My own son convinced that stripping me of my property was for the good of the children. I left the house without saying goodbye. There was nothing left to talk about. Words had lost all their meaning. This was no longer a family dispute that could be resolved with conversations and good feelings. This was a war, and they had fired the first shot using the dirtiest weapons possible. Lies, false documents, medical corruption, and the manipulation of my own son. On the way back to the hotel, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. Not from fear, but from determination. I knew exactly what I needed to do. Eleanor Vance would not be a victim of this betrayal. She would be the protagonist of her own justice. On Monday morning, I drove straight to the bank. I needed to verify exactly how much money I had available for this war. For the last 20 years, I had continued to save religiously, even after finishing paying off the house. Every month, I put away $300 from my pension and the income from my sewing work. I learned early on that saved money was power. It was security. It was freedom. The bank manager, Mr. Davis, had known me for 15 years, a serious and professional man who had always respected my financial discipline. "Eleanor, how can I help you today?" he asked with a warm smile. "I need the exact balance of all my accounts, and I need to talk about a sensitive legal matter." When he showed me the numbers on the screen, I smiled for the first time in days. I had $87,000 in savings, plus $23,000 in certificates of deposit, and $12,000 in my checking account. $122,000 in total. Jessica had been mistaken. She thought I was a poor little old lady who depended only on a miserable pension. She didn't know that Eleanor Vance had been a tireless worker her whole life, saving every penny to protect herself from exactly this kind of situation. "Mr. Davis, I need you to freeze any attempts by third parties to access my accounts, and I need an official letter from the bank confirming my mental capacity to manage my finances. Of course, Eleanor. Is there a problem? My family is trying to have me declared mentally incompetent to take my assets. His face grew serious. This is very serious. Do you need a recommendation for a specialized lawyer? Yes, please. He gave me the name and phone number of Thomas Grant, a lawyer specializing in family law and property fraud. He's the best in these types of cases. Tell him I sent you. I left the bank with a new energy coursing through my veins. It wasn't just the peace of mind of knowing I had the financial resources to defend myself. It was the mental clarity of having a concrete plan of action. I called Thomas Grant from the parking lot. The secretary gave me an appointment for that same afternoon. The attorney can see you at 4 o'clock. It's urgent, isn't it? Very urgent. I spent the rest of the morning organizing all the documents I had collected. The fake property transfer papers, photos of the damage to my house, the list of stolen items, and copies of all my legitimate property deeds. I also printed out screenshots of Veronica's social media, where she was bragging about her new beach house. At 4 o'clock, I was sitting in Thomas Grant's elegant office. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and intelligent eyes that inspired immediate confidence. Mrs. Vance, tell me everything from the beginning. Don't omit a single detail. I narrated the entire story. The invasion of my house, Jessica's humiliations, the fraudulent documents, the fake medical report, the stolen jewelry, Robert's betrayal. He made detailed notes, asking precise questions that showed his experience in these types of cases. Do you have the original property documents? He asked, looking over his glasses. Yes, all of them. The house is 100% in my name. I paid every cent for the construction, and I have all the receipts from the last 20 years. The doctor who supposedly signed the dementia report, has he ever examined you? Never in my life. I don't even know his name. Excellent. This is falsification of medical documents, a federal offense. Do you have any documentation for the stolen jewelry? Yes. Some of it, especially my late husband's watch, is insured for $3,000. Thomas smiled. Mrs. Vance, your case is solid, very solid. We have property invasion, theft, document forgery, attempted property fraud, and possibly medical corruption. Your family has gotten themselves into big trouble. What can we do? Several things. First, tomorrow we are going to file an eviction lawsuit for illegal invasion. Second, we will report the theft of your jewelry to the police. Third, we will report the falsification of medical documents to the medical board and the district attorney's office. And fourth, we will request a restraining order to prevent them from continuing to use your name fraudulently. How long will all this take? The eviction can be immediate if the judge sees clear evidence of invasion. In cases like this, where the invaders have no legal right to the property, the law acts quickly. How much will it cost? My fee is $5,000 for the entire process. Can you pay it? I can pay it today if you like. His smile widened. I like working with clients who take their legal defense seriously. Mrs. Vance, your family thought you were a helpless little old lady, but they were mistaken. You are a prepared woman. I've been preparing to defend myself from the world for 70 years, counselor. I'm not going to stop now. Excellent attitude. One important question. Are you willing to go all the way with this? Because when we start this process, your relationship with your son will likely be irreparable. I was silent for a moment, thinking of Robert, of the boy he had been, of the man he could have been, of the coward he had become. Counselor, my son betrayed me for money, declared me mentally incompetent for money, and publicly humiliated me for money. If our relationship can be broken so easily over money, then it was never a real relationship to begin with. Thomas nodded with respect. Understood. We will proceed with everything. First thing in the morning, we will file all actions. There's something else. I want them to understand that they completely underestimated their opponent. I want them to learn that the consequences of betraying family are real and permanent. What do you have in mind? I want this process to be public. I want all their friends, neighbors, and acquaintances to know exactly what they did. I want the social cost of their betrayal to be as high as the legal cost. That can be arranged. Court records are public, and we can make sure the local media hears about such a scandalous case. I left that office feeling completely different. I was no longer Eleanor Vance, the betrayed and humiliated mother. Now I was Eleanor Vance, the woman who was fighting back with every legal weapon at her disposal. That night, from my hotel room, I called my sister Laura in Phoenix. I told her the whole story. Eleanor, I can't believe Robert would do that after everything you sacrificed for him. It no longer matters what I sacrificed, Laura. What matters is what I'm going to get back. I hung up the phone and sat on the bed, looking towards my house. From the hotel window, I could see the lights on, the music still playing, the celebration continuing as if nothing had happened. Tomorrow would be a very different day for all of them. On Tuesday, at 8 in the morning, Thomas Grant arrived at my house with 3 legal documents, a police officer, and a notary public. I arrived at the exact same time in a taxi, dressed in my best gray suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence. Jessica's family was having breakfast on my terrace when they saw the legal caravan park in the garage. I saw Jessica drop her coffee cup when she recognized the official plates of the police cruiser. "Good morning," Thomas said in a professional and loud voice. "I am attorney Thomas Grant, legal representative of Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the rightful owner of this property. We have come to deliver an immediate eviction order for illegal invasion." Jessica ran off the terrace with a look of panic on her face that I will never forget. Veronica appeared right behind her, recording everything with her cell phone as if it were another episode for her social media. Jessica's mother, who was wearing one of my robes, looked confused and scared. The officer presented the eviction order and began to list the violations: invasion of private property, destruction of personal property, theft of valuable items. As he spoke, I watched the face of each of them, the shock, the disbelief, the growing fear that their actions would have real consequences. "You have exactly 2 hours to collect your personal belongings and leave the property," the officer announced. "Any item belonging to Mrs. Vance must remain here. I will supervise the process to ensure that you do not take anything that does not belong to you." 2 hours? Veronica shouted. "This is impossible. We have children here." "You should have thought of that before invading someone else's property," the notary replied with professional calm. At that moment, Robert arrived, driving at high speed. He got out of the car with an expression of total desperation. Surely someone had told him about the police arriving. "What's going on here?" he asked, almost out of breath. "Your wife and her family are being legally evicted from your mother's property for illegal invasion," Thomas explained. "And you are being subpoenaed as an accomplice in a case of attempted property fraud." "Property fraud?" I showed him the documents. "The property transfer papers you were going to sign to steal my house, Robert. The papers your wife had hidden in my secret closet." Robert turned pale. I looked him in the eyes, searching for some trace of the son I raised, but I only found the gaze of a stranger, a man who had chosen to betray his own mother for money. "Mom, I can explain," he said in a trembling voice. "There's nothing left to explain. You've already made your decision." Jessica approached Robert and whispered something in his ear. He shook his head, clearly uncomfortable. "What is your wife telling you, Robert?" I asked. "Does she want you to tell the police that you have mental problems? That you make things up?" Those words hurt me more deeply than any insult Jessica had uttered. Even in the face of the evidence, in the face of the law, in the face of everything that was happening, they were still trying to label me as mentally incompetent. "Mr. Robert Vance," Thomas intervened, "here is your official subpoena. You have 3 days to appear in family court to answer to the accusations of complicity in attempted property fraud against a senior citizen." "Complicity? But I'm her son. She can't sue her own son." "Mr. Vance," the officer said, "the law makes no exceptions for kinship when it comes to fraud and theft. A crime is a crime, no matter who commits it." The next 2 hours were a spectacle of chaos and humiliation for Jessica's family. From the terrace of my recovered home, I watched as the invasion they had planned so carefully completely unraveled. Jessica's mother was the first to break. After half an hour of crying and shouting, she sat on the stairs and refused to help with the packing. "This is your fault, Jessica," she screamed at her daughter. You told me everything was taken care of. You told me the little old lady had agreed to everything. Mom, shut up and help me pack, Jessica responded, desperately stuffing clothes into plastic bags. The children ran through the house crying and screaming, not understanding why they had to leave the paradise where they had been playing. A boy of about 8 came up to me, with red, confused eyes. Ma'am, why are you kicking us out? We didn't do anything wrong. My heart broke a little. The children were innocent in all this, pawns in their parents' scheme. I'm not kicking you out because you did something wrong, I explained in a soft voice. I'm asking you to leave because this is my house, and your family came here without asking my permission. But my mom said it was our house now. Your mom was mistaken. Jessica heard our conversation and came over, furious. Don't talk to my children. You have no right to confuse them even more. I'm not confusing them. You confused them by bringing them to a house that wasn't yours. This house is ours. Robert is your son. Children inherit from their parents. Children inherit when their parents die, not when their parents are still alive and well. You're already old. What do you need such a big house for at your age? Thomas intervened immediately. Ma'am, every comment you make about my client's age is being documented as additional evidence of age discrimination and psychological abuse against a senior citizen. Jessica fell silent instantly, her face red with anger. Robert had been carrying suitcases to the cars in complete silence, avoiding my gaze. When there were only 30 minutes left, he finally approached. Mom, we need to talk. There's nothing left to talk about, Robert. Look, I admit things got out of hand, but we can fix this. We can reach a family agreement without involving lawyers and police. What kind of agreement? You keep the house, of course. We accept that it was a mistake to come without telling you, and in return, you drop all the actions. And the jewelry? We'll return everything that was taken by mistake. By mistake? Do you really think I'm going to accept that stealing my mother's jewelry was a mistake? Mom, it wasn't theft, it was a misunderstanding. And the fake medical report was also a misunderstanding? And the request for property transfer due to mental incapacity? And publicly humiliating me by calling me a parasite? He remained silent, unable to find excuses for so many betrayals. It wasn't me, it was Jessica, he finally muttered. But you were there. You saw me being humiliated by your wife in my own house, and you said nothing. I didn't know what to say. You knew exactly what to say, Robert. You knew you had to defend your mother, but you chose to remain silent so as not to upset your wife. He became desperate, trying to find an escape that no longer existed. Okay, Jessica behaved badly. I admit it. What more do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth. I want you to admit that you planned to steal my house using false documents. I want you to admit that you betrayed me for money. I didn't betray you for money. I did it for my family. And what am I, Robert? Am I not your family? Yes, you are my family. But Jessica and the children are my main responsibility now. So your main responsibility now is to steal from your mother. Robert put his hands on his head in frustration. Mom, you don't understand. We have huge expenses. The kids need private schools, clothes, vacations. Jessica's house needs repairs. I work day and night, but the money is never enough. And that's why you decided that I had to pay your bills with my life's work? You live alone in a small apartment. You don't need such a big beach house. It's a waste. There it was. The truth had finally emerged. Robert hadn't betrayed me out of love for his family. He had betrayed me because he thought I didn't deserve what I had worked my whole life to achieve. A waste. I repeated the word slowly, feeling its weight on my tongue. Mom, I didn't mean it in a bad way. My 30 years of working day and night are a waste. My discipline of saving every penny to build this house is a waste. My sacrifice of raising you alone after I was widowed is a waste. That's enough, Robert exploded. It's always the same with you, always reminding me of everything you sacrificed, always making me feel guilty for having my own life. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Jessica stopped packing to listen. There's the truth, I said with a calm that surprised me. You didn't betray me for money. You betrayed me because my sacrifices for you became a psychological burden you couldn't bear. I didn't say that. You didn't have to say it. You just screamed it. Robert stood there, breathing heavily, his face red with shame and anger. You know what the saddest thing about all this is, son? If you had asked me for help directly, I would have helped you. If you had told me you were having financial problems, we would have found a solution together. But you preferred to conspire behind my back, humiliate me publicly, and try to rob me using the law. Why? Because I knew you would say no. How did you know if you never asked me? Because you've always been very attached to your money, very controlling with your life's work. Controlling? Robert, I paid for your college. I bought your first car. I lent you the money for the down payment on your house. I helped you financially dozens of times in your adult life. Yes, but always with conditions, always reminding me that it was your money, that it was your sacrifice. I finally understood everything. Robert hadn't betrayed me out of greed. He had betrayed me out of pride. His manly pride couldn't stand to continue being financially dependent on his old mother. You know something, Robert? You're right. I should have forced you to be more independent when you were younger. I should have let you solve your own problems instead of always rescuing you. But it's too late to change the past. And now you will have the chance to be completely independent because, from now on, you will solve all your financial problems without my help. Thomas looked at his watch. Ladies and gentlemen, you have 10 minutes left. The final outburst was chaotic. Jessica screaming orders, the children crying, Robert carrying the last suitcases with an expression of total defeat. When they were finally all in their cars, Jessica rolled down her window and shouted one last threat. This isn't over, you bitter old woman. We're going to appeal. We're going to prove that you're crazy. Go ahead, I replied calmly. My lawyer will be waiting for you. The cars drove away, kicking up dust in my garage. Robert was the last to leave. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, but I had already turned my back on him. Thomas approached. How are you feeling, Mrs. Vance? Tired, I answered honestly. But free. Free from having to pretend we're a happy family. Free from having to excuse betrayal with motherly love. Free from pretending this can be fixed with forgiveness and forgetting. The officer said goodbye. The notary finished his documents. Thomas handed me the keys to my own house, his Mrs. Vance. Your house has been officially recovered. I walked up the steps of my terrace and sat in my favorite chair. For the first time in a week, I was alone in my own home. But the final act of this play was yet to come. That afternoon, I hired a professional cleaning service to erase all traces of the invasion. I paid $700 for 5 women to work all day, scrubbing every surface, washing every stain, rearranging every piece of furniture. While they cleaned, I walked through the house cataloging the damage. In the living room, my beautiful embroidered cushions had been stained with red wine. In the master bathroom, I discovered that someone had spilled hair dye in the porcelain bathtub, leaving black stains that refused to come out even with strong products. In the kitchen, 2 of my French skillets were burned beyond repair. And in my garden, half of my plants had been trampled to death. But the worst of all were the personal items that disappeared forever. In addition to the jewelry, I noticed that my family photo album was gone. The one with Robert's childhood photos, my photos with my late husband, memories of decades of a life built with love and dedication. The wall clock my father gave me when I got married was also gone, an object of no great financial value, but of immense sentimental value. A week after the eviction, my house had regained its original peace. The strange smells were gone. The stains were gone. My furniture was back in its proper place, but I knew that some things would never go back to normal. Betrayal leaves invisible scars that time cannot completely erase. It was that Friday that Thomas called me with news that made me smile for the first time in weeks. Mrs. Vance, I have some important updates. The doctor who signed the false dementia report has been suspended by the medical board. The investigation revealed that he had signed at least 12 similar reports in exchange for money. I was silent, absorbing the information. How many other families had tried to dispossess their elderly relatives using the services of that corrupt doctor? And the legal consequences for Robert and Jessica? I asked. That's the best part. The prosecutor has decided to proceed with criminal charges for property fraud and conspiracy. It's no longer just a civil matter. It's a criminal case now. What does that mean exactly? It means they could face prison time if found guilty. And it also means that all the legal fees they've had to pay have been enormous. I didn't feel joy at this news, just a deep sense of justice being done. I didn't want to see my son in jail, but I couldn't allow him to escape the consequences of his actions either. That same afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was Veronica, Jessica's sister, crying on the phone. "Eleanor, please, we need to talk." Jessica is desperate. Robert has already spent over $15,000 on lawyers, and the legal proceedings aren't even over yet. And what does that have to do with me? We want to apologize. We want to fix things. Do you want to fix things? Or do you need me to drop the charges because you're running out of money? Ma'am, please. Jessica has children to support. Robert could lose his job if this becomes public in his office. She should have thought about the children before she planned to rob me. And Robert should have thought about his job before he falsified medical documents. But you already got your house back. You've already won. Why keep punishing us? Because getting my house back doesn't erase the humiliation. It doesn't return the stolen jewelry. It doesn't undo the psychological damage of being betrayed by my own son. We can return the jewelry. It's at my mom's house. The jewelry that was taken by mistake? The jewelry that you accidentally stole during the confusion of the move? Ma'am, please. Veronica, tell your sister that if she wants to talk to me, she can come here personally and bring all the stolen jewelry. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. The satisfaction came from seeing how the tank they had designed to destroy me was completely falling apart. The sadness came from knowing that my relationship with Robert was probably over forever. 2 days later, Jessica showed up at my door. She came alone, without Robert, with a bag in her hand and her eyes swollen from crying. "Eleanor, I came to return your things and to apologize." I let her in. She sat in my living room like a scolded child, placed the bag on the table, and began to take out my jewelry one by one. "Here are the pearl earrings. Here is the gold watch. Here are the silver coins. And here is the necklace that that we also took by mistake." "By mistake," I repeated, letting the sarcasm be evident in my voice. "Ma'am, the truth is, I took them, but it wasn't to steal them, it was to sell them. We needed the money urgently. We have a lot of debts. Robert lost money in some bad investments last year. We're behind on our mortgage. Our credit cards are maxed out, and the kids need school. And that's why you decided to rob me?" Jessica began to cry. Not those fake, manipulative tears I had seen before, but a genuine cry from someone who finally understood the gravity of her actions. "Eleanor, I admit I behaved badly, very badly. But I was desperate when Robert told me you had this beautiful house and you hardly ever used it. I thought. You thought you could take it from me without asking? I never wanted to take it from you. I just wanted to use it while you weren't here. And then, when we saw how expensive it was to maintain 2 houses, we thought maybe it would be better if the house was officially Robert's to avoid legal problems in the future." Legal problems. You created the legal problems by falsifying medical documents. That was the idea of that cheap lawyer we consulted. He told us it was the fastest way to transfer property within the family. I was silent for a moment, processing the level of ignorance and naivety they had shown. They had ruined their lives financially and legally because they followed the advice of a corrupt, second-rate lawyer. "Where is Robert?" I asked. He didn't want to come. He says you're not his mother anymore." Those words hurt more than I expected, but they also confirmed that I had made the right decision. He says I'm not his mother anymore? Yes. He says a real mother wouldn't sue her own son, that you chose money over family. And what do you think, Jessica? I think we started all this, but I also think you went too far. We could have resolved everything as a family without lawyers or police. How could we have resolved it as a family if you never told me the truth? If you lied to me, deceived me, and planned to rob me behind my back? But we're family. Families forgive. Families respect each other, Jessica. And you disrespected me in every possible way. Jessica got up to leave. So there's no way to fix this. The way to fix this was to not have done it in the first place. After she left, I sat on my terrace, watching the sunset over the sea. The waves crashed against the shore with their eternal rhythm, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding on the land. A week later, Thomas called me with the final news. Mrs. Vance, Robert, and Jessica have accepted a plea bargain. They will pay a fine of $25,000. They will each do 200 hours of community service and will be on probation for 2 years. No prison time? No, but they will have a permanent criminal record, and the false medical report has been officially nullified. Your mental capacity is completely cleared legally. And the legal fees? They've already spent over $30,000 on defense attorneys. Between the fines and the legal fees, it cost them over $50,000 to try to steal your house. $50,000. Almost half the value of my house when I built it. They had lost more money trying to rob me than they could have gained if they had succeeded. A month after the eviction, I decided to do something I had never done. I hired a part-time housekeeper to look after the house when I wasn't there. Not because I couldn't do it myself, but because I wanted to make sure no one could ever invade it again without my knowledge. Maria was a middle-aged woman who lived near the beach and needed the work. She would look after the house 3 times a week, keeping everything clean and safe. I also changed all the locks, installed security cameras, and updated my will to leave the house to charitable institutions instead of to Robert. If he wanted total financial independence, he would have it. One Sunday afternoon, while rearranging some things in the master bedroom, I found an old photo that had fallen behind the dresser. It was Robert at 8 years old, sitting on the beach where years later I would build this house. His childish face was smiling at the camera, showing missing teeth, his eyes shining with pure happiness. I was next to him, younger, with black hair without a single gray strand, holding him by the shoulders with pride. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness so sharp that I had to sit on the edge of the bed. How had we gotten to this point? How had that smiling boy transformed into a man capable of betraying his own mother? Where did I go wrong? Perhaps Robert was right about one thing. Maybe I had been too controlling with my money, constantly reminding him of my sacrifices. Maybe I should have found a better balance between helping him and letting him learn to be independent. But did that justify the betrayal? Did it justify falsifying medical documents? Did it justify trying to rob me? No, nothing justified that. Our mistakes as parents can explain some things, but they do not absolve our children of their moral responsibility as adults. Robert was no longer that 8-year-old boy. He was a 45-year-old man who made conscious decisions and now needed to live with the consequences. I put the photo in a drawer. Those memories belonged to the past, and I needed to look to the future. 6 months later, I received a letter from Robert. A letter, not a call. He didn't even have the courage to speak to me directly. "Mom, I hope you are well. The kids ask about you. Jessica and I have learned our lesson. Maybe someday we can be a family again." I didn't answer the letter. Real families don't betray each other for money. Real families don't humiliate their elders. Real families don't plan robberies using false documents. Robert had decided that money was more important than his mother. I had decided that my dignity was more important than automatic forgiveness. The following spring, I decided to spend a whole month at the beach house. It was the first time I had stayed there for so long since the incident. I invited my sister Laura to spend 2 weeks with me. Together, we planted new flowers in the garden, cooked dishes from our childhood, and talked for hours on the porch, watching the sea. "Do you miss him?" Laura asked me one night as we drank tea. Every day, I answered honestly. But I miss the son I thought I had, not the man he proved to be. "Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" Maybe. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending that nothing happened. It means accepting what happened and moving on. And for now, moving on means keeping my distance. On my 71st birthday, I received a card from Veronica. Inside was a picture of the children and a note saying they missed me. I was surprised. Of all people, I would never expect a gesture of kindness from her. Maybe she had also learned a lesson from all this. I sent gifts to the children for Christmas, but not to Robert or Jessica. The children were not to blame for their parents' actions. They deserved to know that they still had a grandmother who loved them, even from afar. I started attending a support group for senior citizens in Chicago. There I discovered that my story, unfortunately, was not unique. Many other seniors had faced similar situations with their families. Some had lost everything because they didn't have the courage or the resources to fight back. Others, like me, had found the strength to defend what was rightfully theirs. A woman named Dolores told me that her son had sold her house while she was in the hospital, claiming that she would not be coming home. When she recovered, she discovered she had nowhere to live. Another woman, Carmen, said that her 3 children had emptied her bank accounts while she was battling cancer, leaving her with no money for treatments. Their stories made me realize that what happened to me was not just an isolated family drama. It was part of a larger social problem, the lack of respect for and exploitation of the elderly, often by their own families. I decided to use my experience to help others in the same situation. I started giving talks about the rights of senior citizens at community centers. I shared my story and taught others how to protect themselves legally. I also became a volunteer on a support hotline for elderly victims of family abuse. Every time I managed to help someone defend their rights, I felt that the pain I went through gained a new meaning. A year after the incident, I learned from Laura that Robert and Jessica had divorced. Apparently, the financial pressure and social scandal had been too much for their marriage. I didn't feel joy at the news, only a deep sadness for all the lives that had been affected by such wrong choices. One Saturday afternoon, while watering the plants in the garden of my beach house, an unfamiliar car parked in the driveway. It was Robert, alone. He got out of the car slowly, as if he were carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. "Mom," he said simply, standing a few feet away. I looked at him without saying anything. His face was thinner, with new wrinkles around his eyes. He seemed to have aged 10 years in just one. "I came to ask for forgiveness," he said, his voice breaking. "Not because I need money or help, not because I want anything from you, but because I finally understand what I did." I continued in silence, letting him speak. "I betrayed you in the worst possible way. I let my own mother be humiliated and nearly robbed. I signed false papers. I stayed silent when I should have defended you. There are no excuses for what I did." He took a step forward but maintained a respectful distance. "I don't expect you to forgive me now, or maybe ever. I just wanted you to know that I am deeply sorry and that I completely understand why you did what you did. You were right. You were always right." I looked at the man in front of me. No longer the boy I raised, no longer the son who betrayed me, but a stranger trying to find his way back. "Thank you for coming, Robert," I finally said. "Forgiveness takes time." He nodded, accepting my response not as a rejection, but as a possibility. In the following months, I began to allow the children to visit me occasionally. Their faces lit up the house with a joy I hadn't felt in a long time. I taught them how to make cookies in my kitchen. I told them stories about their father when he was little. I showed them how to take care of the garden. They never mentioned the incident. They had probably been instructed not to talk about it. But sometimes I caught the eldest, Sophia, looking at me with a curious expression, as if she were trying to piece together a story she only knew in part. One Sunday morning, as we were planting new tomato seedlings, Sophia asked me an unexpected question. "Grandma, why did you and Dad fight so badly?" I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. She was only 11, but her eyes showed an understanding beyond her years. "Sometimes, Sophia, adults make very big mistakes. Your father and your mother made some mistakes with me, and it hurt me very much." "What kind of mistakes?" I thought carefully about how to answer. I didn't want to poison her relationship with her parents, but I didn't want to lie either. They tried to take something that was mine without asking permission. Something that was very important to me. "This house?" "Yes, this house." She continued digging a small hole for the tomato seedling, processing the information. "Mom says you were very cruel to them. I made them face the consequences of their mistakes. Some might see that as cruelty. I see it as justice." Sophia planted the seedling carefully, pressing the earth around it with her small hands. "I think I understand," she finally said. "It's like when I take my sister's things without asking, and she tells Mom. I get mad at her for telling, but it's really my fault for taking her things." I smiled, amazed by the simplicity and depth of her understanding. "Exactly like that, dear, exactly like that." That night, after the children had gone, I sat on the terrace contemplating the sunset over the sea. I thought about how things had changed over the last 2 years. I thought about the betrayal, the pain, the fight, the victory, and finally, the slow rebuilding that was happening. Forgiveness didn't come all at once, like a great revelation or a dramatic moment. It came little by little, in small moments of connection, in honest conversations, in shared silences. It wasn't the kind of forgiveness that erases the past or pretends that nothing happened. It was a forgiveness that acknowledged the wound but chose not to let it define the future. Robert would never be the perfect son I had imagined. I would never be the perfect mother he might have wished for. We were two imperfect people, bound by blood and decades of shared history, trying to find a new path through the ruins of the old one. At 72, I learned that life rarely follows the script we plan. The people we love disappoint us. Trust is broken. Dreams fall apart. But I also learned that our ability to rebuild from the ashes is much greater than we imagine. My beach house remains a symbol of that truth. It was built with determination when everyone told me a widowed seamstress couldn't achieve such a dream. It was defended with courage when those who should have protected it tried to take it. And now it becomes a place of healing where old wounds slowly begin to scar over. Eleanor Vance, the little old lady they thought they could easily fool, proved to be the strongest of all. Not because she never fell, but because she always found the strength to get back up. Not because she never felt fear, but because she acted in spite of it. Not because she was never hurt, but because she did not allow her wounds to define her. This is my story. A story of betrayal and loss, yes, but also of dignity and strength. A story that I hope inspires other seniors to defend what is rightfully theirs. A story that reminds everyone that age does not make us fragile or expendable, but wise and resilient. And the house? The house I built with so much love and sacrifice still stands, strong and proud on the coast of Malibu, its terrace facing the infinite ocean, just like me. Now, if you like this story, click on this next video that appears on the screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revenge like you've never seen before.